A lot of times, walls are not welcoming.
Like separation, emptiness, a lot of times.
Sometimes walls divide people. It's like a prison.
Vacancy and almost invisibility in a way.
They turn their backs on you. It's the sense that something's happening on one side of the wall that's not happening on the other.
So, when you think of a wall in general, and what are some words that come to mind? What are walls?
Walls are the urban canvas of the 21st century.
It's a great question.
There's a lot of walls in life.
All the stereotypes that we hear about people of color. For me, the best way to counter that is just to paint people as they actually are.
And I'm like, man, am I good enough?
But you gotta present something that's symbolic of them, that they can relate to.
Bottom line, I don't know what I'm doing. I want to do it, so I'm gonna do it. Are you down? And I'm like, hell yeah, I'm down.
The architecture of this wall is very unusual in the sense that it's these divided precast sections that are almost 10 feet by 10 feet each, roughly. It seemed like portraiture would fit, so then the next question was, okay, portraiture of whom? Right across from the wall, you have Bethel AME, the oldest black church in Buffalo, and a critical stop on the Underground Railroad. At that section, you are only a block in from Maine, and all you gotta do is look at a census map, and you'll see this racial divide in Buffalo. And that's where the seeds of the content for this particular mural were sown. It felt like this was an opportunity to have it be an educational space and a dialogic space. And so that's where this notion of talking about civil rights leaders made sense for us to think about and then to seek input from the community so that we could design something that reflected them. What I then focused on was trying to find an artist that could execute any number of subjects and then execute that faithfully in a way that you'd see a picture of whomever and you would recognize them.
I'm Chuck Tingley, and I am a Buffalo artist, muralist, painter, and I currently live in Lockport. I'm sort of a hoarder when it comes to like collecting weirder vintage things. I garbage picked these cubicles from a place next door that was throwing them out. I tend not to use the stuff that I don't see, so if they're tucked in drawers, even though I want to use them, I forget about them. Yeah, it's a real female skeleton, but I was like, this is perfect for references. So I was able to snag that at a good price, even though it's creepy. But I think it's illegal now. It took a long time for me to realize that drawing and painting came naturally to me. It was a hobby as a child growing up, but in high school I think is where it sort of stopped. Worrying too much about what's cool, what's not cool. I went to Buff State College. I noticed I was doodling a lot, like more than paying attention in classes. I took one drawing class and I was like, I love this. This is what I love to do. How do I make my passion match up with my financial? I worked for Macy's for like 10 years. I had to make a decision because my art was going well. That was coinciding with that job. That was like, drink the Kool-Aid. You're making good money, but this is killing me at the end of the day. So I quit there in 2013 and So far, so good. I don't even worry about the risks anymore. I just take the risks because I believe in them.
So,
All right.
yeah.
But you were asking about the controversy, right?
Right.
Okay. Initially, the plan was to have Chuck do all 28 panels.
28 civil rights leaders, African American Heritage Corridor. I had concerns in the sense that I'm not African American. I can paint my ass off and make these portraits look like how they should. Where do we go from here?
Initially, there was a lot of heat that the Albright-Knox was under.
I didn't really recognize how that would be received by the community, and ultimately as a denial of an opportunity.
It ended up on Facebook. And so all of a sudden I had people calling me up, did you hear anything about this? You know anything about this? I knew nothing about it.
And we now recognize that that's exactly what it was.
They have a wall they're getting ready to do. Then I heard they were going to use a white artist that were going to do the whole project.
Here's this thing that I'm giving you, and it's going to be here, and you're going to have to walk past it every day. And just be grateful. And I'm not saying that that was the intention of the Albright at all, but I think that the community felt that way. And
how can you come into this community, something that's our history, and a part of our history, and not use some of our talent and our knowledge?
Everyone's saying it's not about you. It's not about you, it's not about you. It is about me a little bit. Like, even if you say it's not about me, it's about me.
It's something this monumental that's going to be seen for like generations afterwards. People want to know that they had a say in that, and that a person of color had their hand in telling their own story.
First, I have to applaud the gut and the grit to just say, there's a wall here, it needs something, let's do it.
I wasn't aware that it had gained as much momentum as it had. I didn't know about like the community meetings and everything.
We showed up with this concept where we wanted feedback from the community, but they wanted to provide feedback on not just the subject matter, but on who was producing it. There were some heated conversations about representation, who gets to tell that story.
Which was rightful, it was rightful. But at the same time, I was disappointed because that wall's been there for 30 years. What was in the way? Why couldn't we contribute before? Why didn't anybody contribute before? I will say though, at the same time, I think the African American community in particular, they do have other obstacles to get over, you know, red tape that sometimes they can't get through or get by. I understand that as well. But I was just very disappointed that it only became an issue when it was an issue.
I mean, there's a lot of walls in life. Each obstacle is just another wall.
What we had done initially was cause some pain. That was a tough moment. You know, I don't want to be responsible for hurting people.
So it's actually hard for me to even think about what really happened at Albright-Knox because my father passed away at the same time that this all happened. The personal work, it always starts with me, what I've been through, what I'm going through, and then my way of dealing with it is painting. My jump off is the human figure. I've always been interested in the emotional and psychological connection and how I can use the human figure as a vehicle to transcend how I feel. It's not necessarily the person, but it's the emotion I can provoke through that person.
I was really, at that time, very protective of Chuck. I didn't want him to sort of feel attacked. I wanted to make sure that he felt like I was handling it. During our community meetings, the two names that we heard the most, you gotta talk to Eva Doyle, you gotta talk to John Baker. Like if you don't talk to those people, you're not gonna be able to produce out here in an informed way.
I saw the legendary out here and in the picture, and then I saw a live version, so I'm like, wow.
Well, I'm just sort of giving everybody a little history. I'm trying to rely on my memory here.
You are our local historian, and if anybody remember a memory I want to rely on to be yours.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you. Is this your first time seeing?
I've never had an African-American art teacher. As a matter of fact, I didn't even really meet a professional African-American artist until I was in high school. I taught for over 20 years, almost 30 years, with the Buffalo Board of Education as an art teacher. Even now, I still run to some of my students. It's like, Mr. Baker, you're the only black art teacher I've ever had.
So John's been producing for decades in the community, and I think the community really felt like you can't look away from this. This is an artist who has not just skill, not just the ability himself, but he's such an advocate for other people, young artists and people of color in the community who need to have opportunities and who need to feel like they're part of a story.
For some of them, it made a difference, and for some of them, they pursued careers in art in different areas. You have those students come back to you, and you see where you made a difference in their life, and then all of a sudden you see where artistically they decided to pursue a career there. It makes whatever else you had to go through worthwhile. This is the various stages of the window. This, I would say, is the scariest thing I ever done. You know?
Just when I thought
I want to do the artwork that's respected by my community. And I want to make sure the work that I do represents them positively.
saved me once again.
We sort of reevaluated, we listened to the community who had at that point been giving us a lot of names for the subject matter, but they also gave us a lot of names for artists.
I applaud the community to, make their voice heard. Also applaud Aaron Knott for not running. He could have ran. He could have ran very far away from this.
He listened. That's what I admired about him. He listened.
He had the conversation though. I think growth only comes through tough conversations.
We took a lot of those comments to heart and reevaluated the way in which we could execute this piece with additional artists.
To me, creating jewelry, I like a lot for the problem-solving portion of it because it's metal. Paper does not give as much as metal does. Metal has its own kind of, like the wall. The wall has its own attitude. Before I even got to the wall, and I kind of went over there, just touched it. Wow, these grooves are deep, they're really deep. And there's several of them, just ribs, just combed. I just did a straight line across like this. What I got was just dashes, like Morse code, because I couldn't get into the groove. It was just kind of jagged all over the place. I work on paper, very fine paper, smooth, no bumps. So you take the tooth of some paper and you crank that thing on steroids, man, and you have that wall. It's just I spent a lot of time looking at it. Even though I was there, I put white paint on and I would back up and I would just sit across the street and just look at it, right? And then the next day though, the second day, that's when we had the conversation. I figured it was gonna take a conversation between the wall and myself, almost like personifying that wall as a person. I'm Edreys, I'm the Michigan wall. Okay, nice to meet you. This is what I'm here to do. And the wall's like, wall was kind of had that attitude okay, try it. It was eating up brushes, it's eating up markers. That's what it's gonna take. And the wall is going to give me that each time. 2015, I was just in a very dark place. The amount of time that it took to be an educator and a teacher took away from who I am as an artist. So a friend of mine, she said, okay, draw a different drawing each day. Let's just start there. You can find 15 minutes. And I was like, yeah, I can do that. That 5-day challenge turned into 2 years. It was liberating, man, because with intention, I sat down and dedicated myself to what made me who I am as far as an artist. I really just like to draw lines. I have like this mapping style that I draw. Like I see the shades on their faces and I just draw like these little maps of where things belong, what I see in value. Like how can you add value? How can you depict a shadow just through using line? Tightness in order to get darkness, or open the lines up a little bit in order for me to get a little light. I entrusted in that. That I knew I was going to be in my tool set. I just had to add a couple more to my tool belt once I realized the wall wasn't having it completely. Groove started to speak to me in that term, like, okay, what can you do with the lines? Like, there's already lines here. How far apart do you need to spread them? How close do you need to gather them? Do you need to go in between the grooves in order to create your value? I skip a groove, I skip 2 grooves. This all became like this mathematical, and almost just like a music or a song or a rhythm.
I'm really grateful that we were able to have some of these candid meetings. It was a very humbling moment for me to kind of realize we need to listen to communities and the work that that takes. At that point, I'd been considering Edreys, I'd been considering John, and these are all great artists, but you haven't named a female artist yet. And I said, yeah, I know, but I'm looking out there and I haven't met anybody that's available or interested. Like, it just seemed like we're missing them. Well, you are missing them, you know?
I think is the most important thing to capture about a person in their whole mural, their whole face? What's the thing?
Physically, I think the eyes. Just for me, that's either make or break for a portrait. I think like you could have the skin tone right, the values right and everything, but I think if the eyes aren't, you could easily just like lose the whole soul of the painting in a way. Even if you can't get to somebody with words, they can't help but see what you put in front of them. So I think a person's gonna react one way or another. Feel like negatively about it or conflicted, or they'll like it. If art can make somebody that upset, it can also make somebody feel equally empowered.
So I went and saw her work, and it was just immediately apparent that Julia was exactly who we were looking for, right? Her work deals with these intersections of race and class and color and gender, and this is what her entire studio practice is built upon, and doing it through portraiture.
So this is the first oil painting I did. It was a self-portrait, so that's kind of like meaningful to me to know that like the first thing that I did was a self-portrait, and it's turned out to be like one of my favorite things I've ever done, which is so weird because it's just like, oh, I'll try this, I'll see how it turns out. I came up with this idea to do crowns. The idea behind it was just to like show men of color in vulnerable states and kind of like put these crowns on their head that represent the things that I feel like they aren't able to walk around in mainstream society with. People in color in general, but especially men of color, I think they have it a little extra hard in some respects with emotions. They're not allowed to show any sort of vulnerability or anything that isn't associated with hypermasculinity. I think the mainstream media pushes that and makes it seem like it's a bad thing or like it's feminine to be emotional. We just kind of strip that away from men and say you can't appreciate that, you can't wear it, you can't even like think that it's beautiful, because then it just means that you're not a man or you're not masculine enough. A lot of people would say, like, well, why would you choose to represent men if you're a woman? But I think it kind of plays into who I am as a woman as well, because if all the men around me, they have to be emotionally detached, then it's going to negatively affect who they are as fathers, as husbands, anybody that's in your life. Like, if you're a woman, I think you have to care about that too. I just think people are like books or something, like that. Like everybody has this unique story, and it's just exciting to me to get to tell that story. I just feel like I'm relaying that information with the art, and I feel like you get to be a part of a person's life in like a weird, like momentary way when you do that.
I'm glad to be involved in any project that has to do with the history of African Americans, because that's my life's work. The great Harriet Tubman, known as the Black Moses of her people. We have 28 panels, but we can conceivably have 300 panels somewhere. Toward the end of the meeting, people were given the opportunity to suggest some names of the people that they wanted to see on the wall. There were well over 250 names. There had to be a decision made. People met. Committee was formed. We had community leaders, we had a professor, and then what I liked about it is we had the youth. We had to come to a consensus, and everybody's ideas were respected.
Sincerely, there's no way to have selected 28 people and to have that be the definitive 28, especially because we were really interested in telling a very unique story. The version of civil rights that this particular project talks about is one that does specifically honor local impact, that just weaves in and out of every narrative that we feel like is radically unique to the region and yet transcends that, right? It can be something that can be shared by anybody. The wall is far more dynamic than it would have been with just one artist. And now there's a real camaraderie.
So where it is now, we're at the action stage now.
The synergy that we're creating now is like insane.
We have become such a tight-knit group.
I couldn't have asked for a better team. And I'm not just saying that because the camera's on. Yeah. Oh my God, beautiful work. Thank you. Thank you so much.
It's incredible. The response from the community, 10% of the people I've met thus far are in tears. I knew the power of art could do, but I never thought this.
As long as you're out here, there's people riding by, calling your name, congratulating you, thanking you, blowing horns the entire time you're out here. That's even on Saturday and Sundays too.
It's amazing how art can touch people. It's pretty wild to watch people get out of their car and cry. I mean, because it's undeniable how it's affected them. I mean, that's real. You are able to put something out there that has this kind of impact, and it's humbling and moving, and it is one of the most gratifying things you can imagine.
This is more than art. This is an outdoor museum, so that people from all walks of life can come and they can learn.
I saw this woman just kind of pacing back and forth. And before she pulled off, she was like, excuse me. She's like, I just want to let you know that I needed this. I needed a recharge. I've noticed that some people are literally coming here as you would go to like the waterfront or something. Deal with whatever stresses or whatever are going on, or to escape those things, you know? So I think it's a great opportunity for us all to really make a difference in each other's lives.
Western New York. It's being unnoticed, I would say. We're making an impact in that sense. Artists are usually the first people to make that movement happen.
in painting people, it's a reminder that Buffalo is diverse, and Buffalo is not just made up of people who look just like me or just like you. It's a whole mixture of people. So representing that visually, to me, that's important.
This is an artifact. The word art is an artifact. Those slabs are like gold blocks that went. It's evidence that I've been here.
I want communities to come together in the same way this project came together, for art to be that bridge that makes our community more interactive.
People need to get to know one another. They need to be able to understand each other's history and their traditions.
This project is history. It's going to make history, it's going to be a part of history.
I'm hoping that in 100 years from now, women of color won't be such an anomaly on a big project.
If you believe in something and you're passionate about it and you work hard at it, everything else will follow.
Let's do that. Let's be innovative in that sense. Let's set the standard. Let's set the trend.
This story doesn't end, can't end. This story is something that ought to be shared. I think it's amazing what creative people are able to produce. It blows my mind. And the way that people commit to this work is astonishing to me. I mean, it seems like nobody in their right mind would choose to do it, and I'm so grateful that people do.